Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Maybe good morning in Europe, because now it's afternoon in Taiwan. It's my pleasure to introduce Associate Professor Linda Molina. She teaches computer science at University of Helsinki and focus on how technology, especially AI, affects our society. Her research highlights the importance of AI ethics and helping people, especially students, use digital tools in a fair and responsible way. With over 20 years of experience working at the crossroads of technology, education, and society, Professor Linda has played a key role in bringing programming and computational thinking into schools across Finland and Sweden. She also works on ways to help even very young children start learning about digital skills and AI in fun and age-appropriate ways. So I believe a lot of audience would like to know those appropriate ways from Linda. Please join me in welcoming Professor Linda Molina. Hello, Linda. I will close the introduction slides and you can share your slide. Okay.
Thank you so much. And hi, everyone from Finland, where it's now 10 a.m. So the day is just about to start. And I'll start by sharing my screen. So then we have that at least done. So I'm very, very happy to join you for this webinar today and talking about the title Learning with and about AI in K-12 education. And I'll start with a brief introduction on computer science in the Finnish K-12 education system, and then start talking more about AI in just a minute after that. But I think it's important also, since all countries, well, not all countries, but many countries, and especially when we look at the situation of computing or AI in K-12 education globally, there are quite a few different systems or ways in which digital tools, computer science, all of these different computing-related manners and topics are integrated into curricula. So I want to start there just to give you a brief introduction on how we do things in Finland. And then after that, I will talk a bit more about AI and this dual perspective of learning with and learning about AI in education, and give some examples of research that we have currently or recently done as well. But if you think about where we start, how it looked like in the 90s in Finland, we did have basic computer science as part of the curriculum. So it wasn't mandatory, but you could you could choose to have a course on computer science, which had some programming. It had some, well, the computers at that time, if you're old enough, you remember what the computers looked like, so you also know what capabilities they had. But it was mostly about programming and learning to use some basic tools that were then stationed in the computers that were in the lab. But it had some basic computer science, so we should learn about the technology. But then at the 1999, 2000, across around those years, computing and computers became more and more common in the homes, and you had more and more different tools that you could use that were already existing. So you didn't necessarily need to make anything on your own, not create any new programs, for instance, but you already had everything. You could just buy a new program. And I think this is highlighted very well with of course, we use quite a lot of Apple products. So when the App Store, iPhone's App Store was released, the slogan was, "There's an app for that." So basically giving the idea that regardless of what you need to do, you will be able to find a system or a tool or an app that can help you do that. So at that point, the focus of the curriculum changed so that it was considered more important to learn how to use computers and tools in different subjects. So we didn't talk about computer science, we talked more about IT, and it was to be a theme to be integrated throughout the curriculum. And then 10 years later, so we usually have had new curricula every 10 years for K-12 education. So then 10 years later, in 2014, there had again been a switch in how we looked at technology in our society, because around 2012, 2013, there was this increased discussion on digital competencies, the need for programming for all. If you know the organization code.org, they had this hour of code, trying to create an environment where everybody could learn to program just using 1 hour of their time to get some idea of what programming is. Because of course, at this point, we've started realizing that technology has a huge impact on our society, and it becomes more and more important for everybody to have some basic foundation also for how the technological world works, not only the physical one, which we learn about in geography, biology, physics, chemistry, etc. So then again, we had a switch in our curriculum, and then we had the introduction of something called digital competence, not as a subject on its own, but it was to be included throughout all subjects. Had to do also with ethical use of digital tools, responsible use of digital tools, but also programming and computational thinking. So those were also then included in the Finnish curriculum. And if we now then count 10 years from 2014, of course, that would have been 2024. Last year, we didn't get a new curriculum, but we do have quite a lot of curricular development going on within different educational programs. But if we look back to 10 years from now, to this point of time, we could also see that this was nothing only in Finland or in Sweden or in the Nordic countries, but this was development that could be seen globally. And Marcus Zeil, a researcher in computer science education, he then published a paper on learner-centered design of computing education, where the idea was then to try to formulate ideas for what's needed from education in the situation that we are in, given that we come from the computer science education perspective. So the first question was, what do we need to understand about computers? What must we do to put a computer to work for us? So how can we make sure that we use the computers in good ways? How do computers shape the way we see the world? How does technology impact our society, for instance? What are computers not good for? So when should we not be using computers? What should we not use computers for? And then the final one, maybe also the most difficult one, what should we teach learners at different stages of their education about these questions? So this was something that many countries throughout the world started thinking about roughly 10 years ago, and also then revised their curricula, including Finland and also then Sweden, where I work still as well, although I'm now in Helsinki in Finland. After this, in the 2010s, there has been not a discussion only about programming, but also, of course, about AI. And even though we've seen a huge increase in the discussion on AI after the increased release of large language models like ChatGPT, DeepSeek's versions, etc., AI has been around for a very, very long time. And AI is much, much more than only these chatbots and large language models. And this was something that has been reflected in technological literature, of course, for a very long time, and also in research. But one book I remember reading, I think around 2017 or something, was The Inevitable by Kevin Kelly. And in that book, he wrote that he foresees a situation where the new business model will be that we could take anything we already have and then add AI to that, and then we will have a new service. And I think that when we now look back 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, or even just 3 years from now, I think this has happened to quite a lot, to a high extent, that we have more and more AI technology in our solutions. So we have AI solutions that gives us recommendations for what to buy, what to listen to, what to look at, how to drive in a city. But we also have AI solutions answering our questions. We have AI solutions helping us open up or unlock our computers or phones with our face and facial recognition. So AI technologies have been integrated in so many very, very different areas of our society and also then in our everyday life. And given that situation, of course, we are now then pondering, okay, so what, especially after the release of large language models, we're thinking about what should the curriculum look like? What should we actually do at school now when we also have AI in the mix? And we don't have any clear answers in that sense. This is of course something that's being now researched and also then revised into curricula worldwide. But I want to give some input from what we have been doing in Finland, but also with colleagues in Sweden in relation to this. But first, a bit about if we think about AI in education, so what do we actually mean? And I think that it's quite easy today to get stuck in the large language model type of AI, generative AI, that we consider AI merely generative AI. That is AI that can create something new. It can create text, it can create images, videos, sound, etc. And then, of course, be using these chat interfaces so that I ask a question, I get an answer. I give instructions, I will get something as a response. And of course, this was one of the things that raised the interest for AI in education, both in positive and negative manners. But of course, this gives the opportunity for all children and youth and also adults to have a personal tutor so that you could have somebody outside of the classroom, outside of education to discuss with, to get feedback on ideas, to brainstorm around different ideas with. Generative AI also, of course, gives new ways of being creative. So I'm not good at drawing, but I still have a lot of ideas of how I would like things to look. So then I can prompt that and get a visual representation of my ideas, even though I'm not good at drawing myself. Then, of course, using data. So we have quite a lot of data in the educational system. How could we use that in a good way so that we actually can support each student as good as possible? So we're talking about adaptive learning materials, etc., so that we could actually make sure that each student has exactly or roughly the right learning path through a material. And then, of course, also robotics. So, for instance, in Finland, we use robots. They're mostly used for learning to program, but we also have some simple programs for instance, language learning in Finnish classrooms as well. But then, if we think about technology, all technologies have both positive and negative sides. So, if we then consider what could be the downsides of having AI in education, of course, we've had a lot of discussion about cheating and academic dishonesty. And now that we have these tools, these chatbots where you could just ask a question and you will get the result, how can we make sure that students don't cheat using these tools? How can we make sure that they don't outsource their own thinking instead of actually using them as a support? So that's, of course, one potential drawback that we need to keep in mind. There's also the potential drawback of us becoming lazy, that we start using these tools for more and more things without maybe even knowing it. So we're talking about unintentional offloading. And then all of a sudden we have lost some competence we had earlier, or that we become so lazy that we just, I don't want to do this. I'll just ask a chatbot to do it for me. So that's, of course, also a risk. And then if we think about data, so in Europe, we have quite strict data regulation laws and and also national ones. So how do we make sure that data is used in a safe way, in a secure way, but also in an ethical way? What questions can we actually ask based on the data that we're using? Because even though we have data and we can use AI to make sense of the data, we cannot be sure that the results we get from an AI model based on that data actually paints the entire picture of, for instance, a student's learning or difficulties. So in many ways, the discussions that we are having now is based on how do we make sure that these tools are used in a good way? How do we make sure that we learn enough about the technology so that we can use it in a good way? And then about these right and wrong questions. How do we balance between the positive sides and the potential negative sides, and how do we make sure that we actually can do that balancing? So if we then try to go to this dualistic perspective, which I also had in my title, learning with and learning about. So of course, if we think about AI in education, say for instance the generative AI tools or something similar, then we need to learn how to use them in a good way. Both us as adults, but also our students, because the tools will be there, they are already out there. So trying to ban technology has seldom been a good idea, because the technology will still be somewhere. You will always be able to find it and access it through another device. So we need to make sure that we have enough support for students to learn how to use the technology. But that also involves some understanding, because it's difficult to make, for instance, ethical reasoning about a question if you don't know what the basic foundations are. So it's difficult to say whether an AI solution is good or bad if you don't know how it has been trained. And that also then requires some understanding of, for instance, how data plays into how an AI system works. So here is the learning with and the learning about approach. So if you think about learning with, so there we are then with how can we use AI to support learning, to support teaching, to support assessment, to support administration. There are lots of different areas within K-12 education that can be supported using AI. And maybe the most important questions to ask there is, why should we use AI? When should we use it, and how should we use it, so that we actually have a reason for using the technology. That goes for us as teachers, but also for the students, so that they would learn to think about actually having a reason for doing something using a chatbot, for instance, instead of doing it themselves. Because otherwise, I think that the risk is that if we look at the pole jumper or the jumper here in the picture, there's always the risk of using technology to put the bar as low as possible. And I think that these new chatbots, for instance, and generative AI, they give quite a big risk for that, because you can get, if you have traditional teaching assignments, students will be able to get answers to those quite quickly using these tools. But on the other hand, if we have good assignments, or if we are able to foster a culture where we actually think about when to use these tools and when not, then we could actually help students to use these tools to put the bar at a higher level, to actually get more done, to learn more using these tools. So I think that it's very important for everybody to think about these especially these new tools, generative AI tools, based on these questions: why, when, and how. Because we're already seeing research that shows that there's generative AI has an impact on critical thinking. It can lead to metacognitive laziness. It can lead to differences between genders. There are quite a lot of challenges already out there in the research literature that we would need to consider. And of course, these are now only challenges that I put here. There are just as many research articles also on the benefits of using generative AI. So I think that's one of the most important things to remember, is that no technology is only good or only bad. All technologies, regardless of whether we talk about fire or we talk about electricity or computers or AI, there's always a downside and an upside. And it's important for us to learn to recognize those up and downsides, and then also to make aware decisions on why, but why not, when not, and how not to use this technology for what we want to do. And I think that it's easy to say that, okay, so these are tasks or assignments where you can't use any AI at all. We probably have those at all, even at the adult ages, when we need to learn something new. Maybe we just need to do it with paper and pen and sit there and think things through. No AI at all. But then on the other hand, we could also have 100% AI, so that you could use any tools you find, be creative, but please let us know how you have done it. Because then we can, if we move along that kind of a spectrum between no AI and full AI, which Leon Versi has also described in his AI assessment scale, then we can show that it's quite okay to use AI, because we can't ban it, or we can ban it, we can try to ban it, but that won't help. So we need to show students good examples of why should I use AI, why should I not, where should I use it, where should I not, and then also how should I use it and how should I not. So having this spectrum, I think, is key to getting at this aware use of AI, learning with AI. But then the other perspective is then about learning, or about understanding or learning about AI. And that's then more about how do we, or what do we need to know about AI as a technology, as something that changes our society. If you remember the slide, take X, add AI. So we have AI throughout our society. And in order for us to make aware decisions, we need to, I think it's important that we understand something about it. Just like, well, here in Finland, we didn't have very cold winter now, but usually it's cold, and usually we have the seas freeze. So we have ice, so we can drive with our cars on the ice, or we can walk on the ice, etc. And then it's, of course, very important to know the basic foundations of physics and chemistry and biology, to know when does water freeze, what's the risks of going out with, at what point can I walk on the ice, at what point can I take my car and drive on the ice, at what temperature does this become quite risky. And that's based on our basic understanding of the physical world, right? So we can make aware decisions on whether to go out on the ice or not based on what we know about the physical world. So in the same way, in order to make aware decisions on technology, we also need to have some basic foundation about technology. And one concept that has been highlighted quite a lot, and that I've been working on for the last 3 years as well, is AI literacy. There are quite a few definitions of it, and I'll present a framework that we have just published in a while. But the first one, or one of the first ones, or one that's referenced and cited quite a lot, is the one by Long and Magerko, which is based on 5 main questions. So what is AI? What can AI do? How does AI work? What should AI do? And how do people perceive AI? So these should be the 5 basic questions according to this framework, framing what we need to know about AI. And they also write that AI literacy can be seen as a set of competencies that makes it possible for individuals to critically evaluate AI technologies, communicate and collaborate effectively with AI, and use AI as a tool online, at home, and in the workplace. So that's one of the definitions of AI literacy. But so it's about being critical, being able to evaluate the tools, but also being able to use them in a good way to help out in different areas of life. And during the last months, AI literacy has been highlighted quite a lot in a European context as well. So for instance, we have this new AI Act, which is a European-wide regulation on AI tools, or not on AI tools, but the risks of using different AI technologies in different contexts. So for instance, it's not the technology itself that's being regulated, it's the ways in which it's used. So for instance, if we take facial recognition, so it's quite okay to use facial recognition for unlocking your phone, for instance, because that's something that makes it more secure. But then having mass facial recognition in society is not allowed. So it's not the technology that's being regulated, it's the use cases. And as part of this AI Act, there is one article which actually came into force now in February, which actually is called AI literacy. And what it says is that if you're an organization and you provide or you use an AI system in your organization, it's your responsibility to make sure that the people who work for you or are going to use those AI systems need to have a sufficient level of AI literacy. So it's not a matter of whether we want to or not, but it's actually something that's now written into this EU AI Act, that people need to have this kind of competence. Because if they don't, they won't be able to use these tools in a good way, and they won't be able to make these decisions either whether an AI technology is a risk or not. Another thing that's also happening, and that this will be launched in a webinar on May 22nd, is an AI literacy framework launch, which is a collaboration between the OECD and the European Commission. So they will publish or present a first version of this framework on May 22nd. So if you're interested in joining that, please just look it up online and you'll find the information. And then the third big thing that happened in a Finnish and Estonian context is that in February, our ministers of education signed a joint declaration about actively working on embracing AI and media literacy at different age levels, particularly for youth and kids, as a measure to safeguard democracy and then also, as they say, the rule of law. So this is something that's also now at ministry level being highlighted quite heavily. And then there are other initiatives as well. And one of the things that we've been doing is trying to frame AI literacy ourselves based on this particular focus area of K through 12 education, because the one by Long and Magerko, that's general, it's AI literacy, but then there are also other versions that are more focused on K through 12, and that's also something that we have worked on together with colleagues in Sweden. So Jonas Hallström, Charlotta Nordlöf, Fredrik Heinz, Katarina Sperling, and Linnea Stenliden. So we have for a year or so now worked on a multi-perspective and international stakeholder a Delphi study, and the Delphi study is then trying to reach consensus based on many opinions from various people, experts on a given topic. So in this first paper that was published at ACE in Brisbane in Australia in January, we have looked at data from the first round of data, where these experts from different fields, AI education, AI research, educational experts, etc., have given their long answers on three main questions. So and basically giving their ideas on what K-12 AI literacy should include. And when looking through that and then analyzing that data, we ended up with 4 resulting categories, where the first one is about conceptual understanding and knowledge. So this is basically learning about AI. So having some technical understanding, a basic knowledge of how AI works, being able to see AI as part of bigger systems, and also pondering human-machine interaction. How AI interacts with humans and the other way around, and then also the implications of these kind of interactions. So that's one of the categories that these experts found very important. The second one is about ethical and societal considerations. So first of all, responsible use, making sure that AI technologies are used safely and in an ethical manner. And then the societal impact, to understand how AI affects our society. For instance, when we look at the job market, equity, sustainability, social systems, etc. So these are more related then to the ethical and societal aspects. And then the personal perspectives of critical perspective, critical thinking and reflection, so that when we have these AI technologies, that we need to be able to evaluate the technologies critically, questioning what it can do, what it can't do, what are the limitations, what are the consequences. And also when we start using it, to do so mindfully, so that we actually think about how we use them, that we are aware of what for instance, biases can, that there can be potential biases and that they can give incorrect outcomes. And this, of course, then also requires reflection, so that we actually reflect ourselves when we use AI, so that we don't end up in a situation where we start outsourcing our own thinking. So that we start using these AI tools for more and more things, and then at some point we realize that, hey, I can't actually do that anymore myself. And I think that will happen regardless of what we do, because if we think about when we introduced calculators in the classrooms, they helped us, or in society as a whole, they made it possible for us to do more complicated calculations, so we could calculate more difficult things. But at the same time, at least in our countries, we can say that we have become much worse at counting things and calculating things in our heads, because we're so used to using these tools for calculating. Then we have lost some competence in actually doing calculations on our own, just by that in our head. And I think the same thing will go for instance, generative AI tools as well, that some skills will be, we will lose some competencies while gaining others. But I think there is also a risk that we will lose too many competencies if we're not careful and reflective about how we actually use the tools and for what. And that's something that came up in our study as well. And then the fourth category was on design and development. And this was the only one which was very clearly in a progression way, formed in a way of progression. So some experts thought that it's enough that students can identify problems where we could use AI as a solution, so specification. Others thought that it would also be good to be able to design this kind of solutions, so doing some kind of prototyping without programming or training anything. Some thought that it would be good to be able to refine existing systems. And then we also had a final group that thought that kids should learn how to develop their own AI tools or systems. And then there were also practices like collaboration, laboratory work, doing prototypes, communicating over different disciplines, etc. So these were the four resulting categories from the first round. We are now finalizing the second paper, where we have 3 rounds, which is common for a Delphi study. So the results of that one looks a bit different. But these are all the ideas that were present, or these 4 categories summarize the ideas that came up in the first version of our study, first round, where the experts were asked to just write down what they think would be important for K-12 AI literacy. The category which was most unclear, or where there wasn't that much consensus, where the experts thought quite differently about it, was this final one, design and development. So just as a heads up for the upcoming paper, it looks like design and development won't be part of that at all. And I think this is also a result of, if we look at who answered and what did they say. So we had quite a lot of teachers, and we also had quite a lot of AI professionals. And the number of what they thought was important varied quite a lot. So some thought that the technological aspects are most important. That's the blue responses here. Whereas others thought that the socio-cultural, more about ethics and how AI is used in society, what are the impact, that's more important. Those are the orange ones. So there was a difference here also in different people highlighting different aspects. And their design and development was the least common one in general. So that's one thing that we have been working on now, and getting a new study out soon. But then on a more practical note, we have been working with colleagues in another university here in Finland on a project called ILIT, which comes from AI literacy, which has been a participatory process where we have designed AI literacy teaching material, activities together with students, teachers, and teacher educators. So one of the challenges is that if we want to include AI literacy in the Finnish curriculum, we don't have a space for it in the curriculum because we have no subject on its own, but we do have this digital competence that goes over several topics and subjects. But of course, there's always a problem of time. And how do we make sure that the material that's available is suitable from a curriculum perspective, from a teacher perspective, from a student perspective, and also then from a time perspective? So that's why we set out to do research together with teachers and teacher trainers and students. So we have had this very close collaboration with all of these groups. To make sure that the research that we do actually has the reality as a starting point, so that it's not utopian. Because I think that when we introduced programming globally, there was a lot of efforts done, there were a lot of materials produced, which was of course a good thing, but it also led to teachers it was challenging for teachers to know what to actually choose. What should they work with? Which material should they use? Which robot? Which app? So what we wanted to do here now is to take because context, local context, culture, etc., also plays into what we want to include. So we decided that we take the students, the teachers, teacher educators with us, and then we start thinking about what's possible and how can we make that possible in practice. So we worked in 4 phases. So we had co-ideation, co-design, co-implementation, and co-evaluation. So we've done everything together with these stakeholder groups. We started with grades 1 to 6, or 3 to 6 basically, which is ages 10 to 12. Now we're working on grades 7 to 9, which is ages 13 to 16. And in fall, we will start working also on upper secondary level, which is then age levels 16 to 19 approximately. So we now have project funding for covering all of these different perspectives. So in the first part, we actually sat down then with teachers, students, teacher educators, and tried to identify what their experiences are, what conceptions they have of AI, what misconceptions they have, what are their needs, and what are their preferences. And there we learned that, okay, they think that 3 lessons, 3 hours per year is what all teachers should be able to fit into their calendar. 3 hours isn't much, but if the other option is no hours at all, then we decided, okay, so let's try to create a good material for 3 hours per year. And that is then also what we decided to do. So we started designing a first version. We reviewed that with the teachers, with the teacher educators, and did redesign based on their feedback. And then we went into classrooms. So we had students in classrooms with these teachers, and we tried out the lesson materials in order to get an evaluation of the experiences, both from the teacher and the students. And then we reviewed the experiences with all of the stakeholders. So we analyzed all the material, and then we sat down with teachers and teacher educators to see, okay, so what should still be done in order to get this material in as good a manner as possible. So we ended up then with 3 lessons, and they have these focus areas. So the first one is focusing quite a lot on foundations to get some idea of what students think AI is, what are the conceptions, what are the misconceptions, because I think that adults and young people do have misconceptions of AI, so it's important to start from there. In particular, I think that it looks like from our data, it looks that we usually say that, hey, AI is everywhere. You can find AI everywhere today. But that also makes it difficult to actually say what is AI and what is not AI. Because, for instance, if we ask students, they are like, yes, 3D printers, that's AI. The toothbrush is AI. But it's not the 3D printer or the toothbrush that's AI. It's just that some kind of AI technology may be built into the toothbrush or to the 3D printer. But those are not AI technologies per se. So a toothbrush is a toothbrush, but then it can have some AI functionality. So these are things that we discuss quite a lot. And also where AI can be found, what kind of different AI technologies there are. And then they get to decide an AI solution on their own as well, a smart backpack or a smart AI powered shoes. So that's the first one. Then in the second one, we also talk about what a model is, how data is used to create a model, etc. And then in the second part, we focus on how AI works, and there we use a teachable machine that has been developed within another Finnish project called Generation AI. It's built on Google's teachable machine, but it's GDPR safe. So it has this data protection for because if kids, for instance, use their own images as data to train a model, then that data cannot be shared anywhere. But basically, the idea there is to get kids to see how we can train an AI model and then also see what happens if data is not good. So if we don't have representative data, then the results will be bad. So we will have discussions on that as well. So for instance, if we try to train an AI model to learn how to recognize cats, and then we use, you can't maybe see, but on the background of that image, there are images of cats in trees. And if we use that kind of data to train a model, of course, the model will learn that, well, cats are cats, but cats look like this. Cats are something that are in trees. And then if we train the model to recognize cats based on that, then it will think that an image of only a cat might be a cat, but also if we show it an image of a tree, it might think that the tree is a cat. So here we go into these more ethical questions. And then the final one, going even more into the ethical ones. What should AI do? So we have ethical dilemmas. We have AI-generated images of students in classrooms, and then we discuss whether does this look like the situation we have here? How come there are so many errors in the images, etc. So just to try to give some idea on what AI does and what it should do and what it might not do correctly all the time, to raise these critical and ethical considerations. But of course, what we do in the classroom, that's one thing. So if we talk about another concept that's used quite a lot today is AI readiness or AI preparedness. So, and that's then how prepared are we to, in an organization or as an individual, to actually adapt and use these new technologies in a good way. So we can do things in a classroom, and that's of course very good for those students and those teachers. Even better if we were able to do something school level so that it would not cover only one classroom, but it would cover all schools, all classrooms in that school. But in order to make that a possibility, we probably need changes to curricula and local policies. And I think that there are initiatives working on that now. And that, of course, also reflects politics, culture, values, that what's valued in a society, what's seen as more important than others, etc. All of these things play a part in what we actually then see in our curriculum as well. But if I go back to the question listing that I started with by Gazdiel about what do we need to understand about computers, I think that we could now revise that 10 years later to instead also talk about AI. So I think that what we're doing now in my research, but also in many others' research who focus on this AI literacy, is to try to get to grips with what we need to understand about AI. If you're an expert, you need to know something. If you're a non-expert, what do you actually need to know? And what are the conceptions that we might need to fix? What must we do to put AI to work for us? How can we make sure that we use it in a good way so that we benefit, not so that we outsource too much? How does AI shape our world and how we see the society? What is AI not good for? What shouldn't we use it for? And again, what should be taught to learners at different stages of their education? And in all of this, I'll finish with a slide on a course that we might also need, that what does it mean to be human? Because we talk so much about technology, we talk so much about AI literacy, but one important part of that is also this human AI interaction. So trying to also highlight what's unique for us, thinking about what kind of technology we want to serve us and what are things that we do want to automate, but what are the things that we don't want to outsource? What are the things that we want to keep as human tasks also in the future? I think that's important to reflect on, regardless of how old we are. And with that, I'll end my presentation and thank you all for listening.
Okay. Professor Linda, thank you for your inspiring talk. Yeah. So let me represent our moderator, Professor Xu, to ending this talk sharing. Yeah. So I'd like to sincerely thank you all to for your participation and engagement to this webinar. So special thanks to our speaker, Professor Linda Manila, for her inspiring and insightful talk. We truly appreciate the valuable ideas and shared today on AI and the history of computer science, and then move to the AI, as well as I learned a lot about the social cultural perspectives of AI in education in your talk. Yeah. So, yeah. So for the last, I would like to thank the APSCE City STEM SIG organizing team for making this event possible, and we encourage everyone to stay connect through upcoming SIG activities and discussion. So for the next, we would like to invite our audience to ask some questions based on Professor Linda's talk. Yeah. If you are not convenient to speak via webinar, you can type your question via Zoom chatbot. Any questions?
I think there's one hand raised.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Say it. Yeah. So you can you unmute and ask questions?
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yep.
Hello. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm Nihira. Okay. I'm from University of Indonesia. I just would like to know your experience from using AI tools in classrooms. So regarding the the ethics and plagiarism as well as the copyright. How you handle that?
Well, the projects that we are working on is not actually about using the tools, but it's more about it's both of these aspects. So it's both about learning about the tools, but also, of course, using. But the AI literacy projects are more about the understanding part. But just to reflect a bit about about your question, which is a very good one, and I think that this is a crucial question for all teachers today. And I could also reflect a bit about it based on my university teaching, of course, because there I see it, especially since I teach. If I start there, I teach basic programming, and we do that in an online course. So we have lots of tasks that students are to work on, because programming is learning by doing. So you need to do a lot of programming in order to learn. But of course, the challenge comes from the course being online, and we also have very good testing, automated testing. So basically, it's very difficult to know what students do on their own and how much they use chatbots to actually create the code that those, in an introductory programming course, the programs aren't very difficult. So how can we make sure that the students actually work on the code themselves and not just ask a chatbot to create it? So that's a context where we are working or discussing the challenges quite a lot at the moment. And I think that the only thing we can do is to try to come up with new kind of tasks, which is not easy either. But that's one way of looking at it, trying to come up with tasks that are more LLM proof. But then the other one is also to try to consider this spectrum that I talked about, like having some tasks, some assignments where it's off limits. You can't use AI. And then that could be that all computers away and you actually sit there and work with pen and paper, which of course in an online course is quite difficult because all the students are somewhere else. So that would require then having them actually at campus. But that's one aspect, to have some tasks that are there, but then some tasks where you can use AI for some parts, and then also having these tasks that encourage students to see what is possible when using all of these tools. What can you actually do if you use all the tools available? And then of course that kind of a task needs to be at much higher level of, for instance, Bloom's taxonomy. It can't just be give me the facts about X. It needs to be more about synthesizing, analyzing, to make sure that the student actually then can ask the right questions, to make sure that the prompting goes in the right way in order to actually be able to solve that kind of a complex problem. So I think that the biggest challenge is for us as educators now to actually try to come up with good ways of looking at education and looking at what learning actually is. What do we actually want to make sure? How can we make sure that the student learns? And I'm not sure whether, for instance, if we have had these tasks earlier where students have just written a long text and handed that in, and then we have given a grade based on that. That's probably never been a good idea, because anybody could have written that text. It doesn't necessarily, we don't know whether that student has written it. So I think that it's a wake-up call for us as well to actually start thinking of how can we measure learning and how can we do it in a good way as possible given the new tools. In classrooms in Finland, if we think of K-12, students hardly are allowed, or we don't use chatbots yet in education for students because of for instance, the GDPR, the data protection regulation that we have, and also the age limits of these tools that are available in our countries. So they usually are 13 or 16. So high school students, they might use it. And there are these same challenges there as well, but then trying to think of how to actually create good tasks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a long answer. Sorry.
Yeah, Professor Linda, we have one more question from our participants. Have you seen the question in the chat box?
In the Q&A, yes.
Yes, she asked, what are the key challenges faced by various stakeholders in the education system with the integration of AI, particularly agentic AI in teaching, learning, and institutional decision making?
Well, I think there are some some challenges are probably the same.
Yeah.
But I think that, for instance, if we look at decision maker, because I think that lots of what happens in the classroom, of course, one teacher can do a lot. If you have a teacher who is very enthusiastic, who is very interested and who thinks that this is an important thing, then that teacher can do quite a lot if they have autonomy to do what they want in the classroom, as long as the learning objectives are being met. But when we talk about AI, there are quite a few challenges, as I see it, also at decision maker level or even on policy level more. If we think, for instance, about the data protection regulation, that we don't have any tools that can clearly be, that can say that no personal data of the students will be sent elsewhere. And this is not only about AI technology, but also about other digital tools, because that's something that's very important in Finland and in Europe, for instance, that this student data needs to be protected. And then if you think about AI, of course, then it's even more highlighted, because where are the prompts handled, analyzed, in what country, etc. So there are a lot of different questions related to regulation that's of course important on policy level, but then also comes down to the actual teachers. But then if you think about the schools and the teachers, especially in our countries, their teachers are quite autonomous, so they are free to design their education in the way that they see most clearly fit. So if they were to be allowed to use these tools, then they could design their teaching on their own. And there I see the key challenge then as how do we make sure that education becomes similar for everybody, so that it's equal, so that all students get the same opportunities regardless of who they have as a teacher. So I see those as maybe the two main challenges now. Are we allowed to use? How are we allowed to use it? And then also, how do we make sure that everybody gets the same opportunities?
Okay. Thank you. So I think the last question is also the similar about the challenges of research about AI in education. We also encounter the similar challenges. I think in Finland and in Hong Kong, in our region, we face the same challenges in classroom implementation. Especially for young learners in the classroom. Yeah. So
and it requires time from the teachers, quite a lot of time and effort. So that's, I think that's, but then if you have good collaboration with the students and the teachers, then it's very good.
Yeah, you talk also inspire me that we need to consider our society and our culture, also our culture and including the different needs from our stakeholders. For example, the parents or the policymakers, or school leaders. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Linder. So we now can end our sharing. And thank you very much for your time, and we can communicate later after the session. Yeah.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you all for attending.
Yeah. You can first leave our Zoom now. I will announce the next talk to our audience. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. So let me share the our next plan. Yeah, here. So this is our next speaker. Is from the University of Zagreb, Croatia, Professor Brizanka. So our moderator will be Professor Ivica. I'd like to remind our participants to try to register our webinar. Yeah. All speakers are from our area, field research area. Here we would like to conduct a small survey about your experience and about this talk delivered by Professor Linda, learning with and about AI in K-12 education. yeah, feel free to scan our QR code and fill in the very short survey. Okay. Yeah, I'll open this. QR code. Yeah. I also need to scan it. So this seminar is conducted by, I think it's STEM, CTE STEM, SIG. Yeah. So our professor, she also asked me to announce one important event that CT STEM 2024-25 will be conducted in EDU HK, which is my university, and yeah, so you're welcome to attend this conference. If you fill in the form, you can leave Zoom now. Thank you. So I'll still fill in the